welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. Today, we have one of my all-time faves, Katie Warnock. She's the founder and president of Staffing Boutique. In the green room, she asked me if we ever have repeat visitors. And I told her I hadn't really thought of it that way, but really there's only about 6 people that we bring on as thought leaders, and we have them, talk us through changes in the market. And Katie's one of them. And Katie really helps us understand the labor market and all the things going on staffing. So to answer your question publicly, Katie, you're one of those folks. And I was thinking today as we got ready for the show, oh my goodness, how the labor market has changed since we first met you. Every month we have you on, I feel like there's a new trend. There's something different. It's absolutely riveting to see how you're on the front lines and you and your team see things first before any other parts of the sector see it. Yeah. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I think so. I think New York gets everything first, right? So we see it. It's these labor reports and unemployment reports lately have been a little crazy. Unemployment rate was pretty high, the last report that came out, and the jobs report was down, which in our sector and what we're seeing in the trends on LinkedIn, we had a really, really slow 2 quarters, and we've been so busy basically since after July 4th weekend. So that's not really what is on trend with what's reporting in the news. I always subscribe to Idealist and Foundation Center, and I could see what's going on LinkedIn. So many of my connections are hiring every day, multiple people, where it was like silent and dead. Like LinkedIn is popping right now. I'm in bed scrolling through LinkedIn and I'm making screenshots of who I have to call tomorrow, which I wasn't doing that 6 months ago. So, I think it's busy. That's what we're seeing. Certainly people are getting laid off in some areas and sectors, and we saw a lot of layoffs, obviously early in the year. But I don't know. I'm seeing movement in the market.
Do you see this as temporary, or are these full-time placements? I mean, is it
both? Okay. There's a lot of executive search. I was just reading a report yesterday. Executive search in the staffing industry has really picked up. So that, and then, contract workers, depending upon the niche. Obviously, if AI can replace it, then not so much. But yeah, we're busy.
Wow. Well, this is what makes it so interesting to have you on, so that we can really get the viewpoint of an expert who's in our sector. And it's just so powerful. I feel like that's what puts the Nonprofit Show ahead of the curve, because we're getting thought leaders on who are in the mix talking about what's going on day by day. And really, we are supported because of our sponsors. And they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, of course, our friends at Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. But again, more importantly, I get to spend some time this morning with the amazing Katie Warnock, founder and president of Staffing Boutique. So Katie, before we dig into this conversation even more, as we were chatting when we started the show, you're involved in the labor market, I'm going to call it labor management, because you deal with nonprofits doing what? What are they looking for?
They're looking for employees, right? So my clients are basically anything from any type of organization, cultural, social services, social justice, the arts. We do everything. We do a lot of work in the, education space, and they hire temps from us and full-time employees. So we do everything from temp to permanent recruitment, from an admin assistant all the way up to the executive director. We get a lot of development jobs in. We're about to take in a search for campaign managers. We're seeing some movement in development. And this is what we specialize in. So we basically eat, breathe, and sleep fundraisers all day.
I love it. I think it's so powerful. And I just love that we get this inside track of information from you. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the issues of staff retention. And I want to start off with, what are the costs of getting a new person seated in your organization? How much does it really cost us to onboard a new employee?
Well, the national average says $4,100. I have to think, depending upon, the level of the employee, that could be way more. But it still costs. That's a good chunk of change, from technology to getting them trained, taking away other employees' tasks to getting them onboarded, all of those things, the HR costs, everything that goes along with it. I think in New York it's probably a little bit higher, but that was the national average. So it does cost a lot.
Wow. And that's really at an average level. So to your point, if you're bringing in a vice president or CEO or, CFO, those numbers, you can expect that to be higher, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I would think that.
Wow, that is crazy. I gotta believe, and this is kind of a curveball question. Do you see that your clients and people in the nonprofit sector even understand this? That they even budget or plan on this?
No, I don't think that they do. It's funny that you say that. I don't think that they do, but I do think that they know how expensive healthcare is right now. And that's something that I think everyone is stuttering on. Like I have clients that would prefer to leave my temps as temps that have been there for over a year. They're certainly free to go onto their payroll directly, and they keep them on. It's just they don't want to pay the payroll costs for them. I'm sorry, the health insurance costs for them. They'd rather leave them on my payroll and pay them hourly.
Wow, that's an indication, if ever there was one.
I was just reading a report over the weekend regarding the rising costs of health insurance and how staggering the numbers are, and the increases every year, and the renewals are intense. And how do we manage that and rectify that in organizations, or course correct, if you will?
Right. And I think, the nonprofit sector is notorious for having less than stellar or even secure healthcare. So many that just say this isn't an option.
Yeah, it depends. Some of my clients have really great health insurance, and then not so much. I've seen it all, basically based on the sector I'm servicing.
Right. So fascinating. Well, now that we kind of have level set that we're going to be spending more than $4,000 just to get somebody seated into a position, what do we do to keep them where they are? And then one of the things I wanted to ask you about is understanding the marketplace and what that compensation factor is. I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the for-profit sector does this much better, that there's always a competitive analysis of what the going rates are, or maybe it's just easier to get that information. But in the nonprofit sector, it seems like we don't talk about it, or it's fraught with a lot of tension.
I talk about it. Yeah. It's a real nightmare. So there are two things to that. So in corporate, the thing is they have the flexibility for hiring. So they can sort of say, like, this is my hiring budget for this department, and now we can play around with salaries, right? Like, not everyone has to be making the same amount, and they can hire on par for the talent that they're recruiting, right? And remember when we were talking, when the economy was really booming post-COVID, like the average salary offer for a next stepper, someone leaving a company and going someplace else, I think it was up like 22% or something like that, which it's typically at about 10% increase in salary. It's really high back then. And that's because competition was so high, and people were really hiring. The economy was booming, right? So again, corporate can do that. With our nonprofits, this department has this much money budgeted for employees, and they basically have to stick to that budget for 1 fiscal year, sometimes 3 fiscal years, and the board is not approving increases. So even though the executive director or the CEO or even the board can see that this type of position in this size organization with this budget, with this many employees, should be getting X dollars, the time that they can react might not be until 2 years later, for them to adjust their numbers and pull back, et cetera. So it's not just as easy as like, oh, give them more money. Like, so knowing the competition, it's great, but it doesn't really matter if the dollars aren't there to fund it, right? Yeah. So that's where we have to be creative about how do we make our employees happy without dollars. And that's something that we're going to chat about today.
Wow. Do you know, I've never heard anybody really boil it down that way, because you're right. This is like an act of Congress to get your budget realigned. And if your board has set forth that budget and passed it, it is a huge deal to move those funds around.
Yeah, it's like 18 board member meetings at night that no one's coming to, over an 18-month span. Like, it's a real nightmare. Yeah. So, I mean, but that is the same argument I was making when we were dealing with inflation. And like, we're still paying people, a development assistant, the same amount of money, and we just can't. Like standard in New York, what we found when everything opened up post-COVID is for us to get employees to show up to work, to actually be there on site, we had to pay them a minimum of $25 an hour. Mm-hmm. We used to be able to pay development assistants $17 an hour pre-COVID, maybe even $16. Okay. And that's with a college degree. Now I could sit and say, like, to a client, I'll find you someone for $17 an hour. They're not going to show up. Like, they might show up on the first day, but maybe they'll come in 2 days this week. Like, you really need to be paying $25 an hour to get someone to show up to work. And that could be not a college degree. So right. we struggled with that when we were talking about inflation. And now we're struggling with it if we're talking about the competition in the market. It's always going to be an issue for nonprofits.
Wow. It's such an interesting aspect of this. And I gotta believe that most people in the job market don't even realize this process, right? And then
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, I see it every day. I see the struggles. I see people wanting more money and them needing raises and being like, I'm still making the same thing. And, I think that that's part of going into the nonprofit sector. Like, the expectations aren't there for you to get a raise every year or a bonus. Like, I've been hearing that for 20 years. You don't go into nonprofits to make so much money, right? But at the same time, turnover is high. Yeah, we see that. And then when you do get to the executive director level or the major gifts level or program director, you're starting to maybe make the money that you put in 15 to 20 years under your belt, being very underpaid, in comparison to your friends that are working in corporate, right? And so you finally get there. So, I mean, you just have to, I guess, pick and choose what you want to deal with. But at the same time, we have to compensate our employees for what fair market wage is right now. And I think that takes the management with the board.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that you brought that up. And I love it because it makes it less arbitrary in one way. It's like, yeah, we value your role and we value your professionalism, but the reality is there's some barriers as to how we're going to manage it. Mm-hmm. So really, really interesting. Okay, so then let's talk about keeping, understanding this parameter that you set where we can't just go in and move money around, that we are working with an organization that has a budget that's been voted on, approved, and that's pretty much set in stone. What are some non-cash benefits? And what do you see as things that we can float towards our staff, again, to keep them from walking through that revolving door?
So I want to bring this back a second and just talk about, you need to know your demographic and your staff. Like, it's so important for your HR person or your chief people officer to know the people, to really know what they want, because we've had such a big push for diversity in the workforce, for definitely always in nonprofits for the past 5 years. But now that we have such a diverse workforce, people's goals are different. Are we talking about the married couple? Are we talking about the single person? Are we talking, who are we talking about? Are we talking about the person who just wants to stay as a temp because maybe they're an opera singer? Like, you really need to know what your employees want. And once you have a good pulse of that, it's easy to offer sort of other benefits, right? And so it's the same thing that we're talking about always. No one wants to go to work anymore. No one wants to go to work anymore. no one wants to go to work anymore. Like, I cannot say that enough. We have tasted it. We see it. We can see that work can be done remotely. Give it to the employees. Like, this is the number one thing that people are looking for. Like, I am a sucker to a 5-day a week, in the office, and I'm not doing it anymore. So be flexible there. I think everyone pretty much wants that flexibility. I recently heard, and I'm probably going to jack this up, I think it's called a 980, where basically you structure a 9-hour workday as opposed to an 8-hour workday, and then you get every other Friday off, right? So right. Even something as simple as that, that's so awesome that 2 days a month you're going to have a 3-day weekend. That's a huge benefit. Other things, professional development, making sure people are upskilling, paying for that, registering them for seminars, doing things like that. What are the benefits with health insurance? What are you covering? Can you cover, IVF or any sort of fertility treatments is something that we've seen in the past. Can you pay for gym memberships? That's another thing. Are you being flexible with the workday? What if you have someone that just performs better if they wake up at 9 o'clock and aren't online till 10, but they'll stay till 7 or 8? How do you kind of maneuver that with your employees? So little things to be creative, I think, are huge. I don't know, team building, nights out. What does your staff want? Ask them. You have to ask your staff. I can give you, you could put it into ChatGPT. What are 10 things? We can all come up with a wish list of things we want from our employers, but what does your staff want? That's going to vary in every city and state.
So this might seem like a completely moronic question, but how do you figure that out? I mean, how do you ask your staff those questions and then at the same time make it equitable? Because that young family, that mother who's dealing with, babies, or that person that is an empty nester or working with elderly parents. I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's so many different life cycles
sure
we're dealing with. So how do you recommend that
again, I'm not HR, but I deal with HR a lot, right? So you hear such terrible things about exit interviews, and so many organizations have them. So why aren't we doing something like that on the initial hiring? Once they're onboarded, I would say this is what our organization is open to doing. A 3-day work week, or if you are meeting this expectation, you'll eventually work to a 3-day work week. Would that work for you and your family or your situation? No, actually, I would prefer to work 5 days in the office. All right, that right off the bat. Does it make sense for us to offer a 9-hour day for you? Like, would that work for you? Do you need these healthcare benefits? Do you need this? Like, kind of have a buffet of whatever you could possibly offer and see what works. That's what a chief people officer should do. They should know their talent. They should know who's working in the organization, chief of staff, what have you.
It's really interesting. So then how do you make it equitable so that you are making sure that everybody is feeling compensated?
It's taken care of? Well, I think that the number one thing that we're seeing in, I don't want to say the workforce, but let's just say the workforce and the world and the community and the new generation that's coming up. Everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to be heard. Everyone wants to have a voice. When we look at exit interviews, a lot of people say that maybe they're just treated as an employee. So if we are doing normal check-ins with our staff, if we are doing reviews with them and listening to their wants and needs, that would help us take a census of what we need to do and offer it widely, right? And then let the employees pick and choose what they want to do.
Interesting. I love that you use the word buffet, a buffet of choices, because what is working for somebody right now, they might need something different in 6 months, in 12 months. I mean, or something that comes up. Very, very interesting. Again, I've got to believe that this isn't being done. This has got to be just like one of those things that we're not leaning into across the nonprofit sector.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think that everyone talks a good game. I think that everyone says we care about work-life balance and we want our staff to turn off, and we put that clause like, if you don't answer email, or if this email's coming through to you at this time and you don't answer me back. Do you ever see that clause at the bottom of email signatures and you don't answer me back till your office hours, that's completely fine. I'm just working. Like, what are we doing here? Like I will say, if we are working from home, we're probably working different hours, right? Like
Right.
for me, I break up my workday into 3 parts. That works for me. I'm not expecting someone who has a family to do that, but answer my email when you come back. But anyway, to answer your question, I'm kind of going on a tangent. Everyone talks a good game. Like they want to give workers the autonomy to have flexibility, etc. But I think that if you drill down into the CEO or the executive director, they're seeing a frustration of that mentality. And that's not necessarily what they want to be doing, but they know that that's essentially what's cool now. And that's the movement. And that's what they have to push because that's what HR is telling them to push.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because we talk about this revolving doors. We started our conversation this morning. And if you're not thinking about who's up next on the bench or what your growth of your team is, it's a huge shock. And
Right.
you lose so much productivity. I mean, you lose so much productivity. You can't just grab somebody off the street and plunk them in a seat and think that you're going to be getting all that work done. It just doesn't work like that.
I hear you. And I think that goes back to everything I've always said is like, you do not have a recruitment plan unless you have a retention plan. But that retention plan has to be specific to your workforce. It really has to be catered and dialed into what the needs of your employees are. And that's going to be different for every single organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you said that. I think that's really wise. And I think it's absolutely fascinating to maybe step back from thinking about what the industry is doing, what the whole sector is doing, and bring it back and to say, what is it that your organization is doing? What is it that your staff wants?
Exactly.
So that you can be much more reactive in a good way, I guess I should say. As we kind of wind our time down with you, I want to talk to you a little bit about this because it seems to me that we are bleeding off now more than ever so many C-suite leaders who are just exhausted and burnt out. And a lot of this, I think, is because we have an aging workforce in C-suite leadership, and they probably overstayed their welcome during COVID because they were like, boards were like, oh my God, don't leave us, just stay, we got to get through this crisis and then you can leave and then we'll figure it out. And those boards haven't figured it out. And so we have this burnout thing going on. How do you see that as something that we should be talking about so that we're keeping our staff?
I can't believe that was 5 years ago we were talking about that regarding, people just pushing off retirement because of COVID, right? And people are still in the role. So I think that it's kind of the same thing that I've always preached. What are we doing to take care of our employees and their mental health? I know that the burnout is real. I'm running this company and I have to be honest, like since July 4th, I'm tired. Like it's been a lot of long days. It's been a lot of hard work answering emails. I'm feeling the burnout, so getting sunlight, exercise, all of those things that we talk about, getting in good nutrition, like this is going to lead to eventually healthcare costs going down. There's such a sick population. It has to do because so many people are just working and burning out and working and taking in caffeine. And it's a real nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a really interesting thing. And I feel like we, in the nonprofit sector, we kind of wear, our misery like a badge of honor. We don't always, we'll say like, oh, we want to protect our clients, but then we don't protect our staff, right?
Yeah.
We're like, oh, tough it up because the people that we deal with have a lot worse than you. You know what I'm saying? It's a horrible mindset.
Yeah.
Mindset.
Yeah. I feel that. I will say that my clients are pretty good at not answering me after, when they're shutting down on a Friday, a lot of them do work late. They're pretty good at taking the weekends. I have some clients that will chat with me on a Sunday on email or something like that. But I do think that they do value their time off and they should, they shouldn't have to answer emails, but the burnout is real, take your vacations. You deserve them. Take your walks, get outside, get your vitamins, do all the things. Take care of yourself first.
Right. Well, I'm going to witness, sister, because you answer, I'm in the West, you're in the East. And when I send you email, I'll be like, oh, dang, it's so much later. And you're always on it. And sometimes I feel badly that I'm like, oh, I should have delayed the delivery of this because, you work. It
I
seems like
work.
you work
Yeah.
all the
Yeah, it's been nonstop. I'm not gonna lie. It's been a little too much, but that's okay. I mean, busy is good, right? And my business comes in waves. It's such a cyclical business. There's so many times throughout the holidays that it's just dead slow. So, you take advantage of the slow times, and when it's busy, you work your butt off. And that's what I tell my staff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have to. And I think that's one of the things, like you just said, work can be very cyclical. And especially we see that now, in particular with the nonprofit sector moving into Q4, the stress of that year end, funding push and
Yeah.
holiday donations and all of that, getting ramped up. And this sense that if we miss this quarter, we've missed like the whole year. It's a really
Yeah.
stress.
Yeah, for sure. And for us, I will say, I think it was the weekend before Labor Day weekend. I sent out 1,000 in-mails on LinkedIn because I was just so busy that I stayed home the whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I sent out 1,000 in-mails. I will tell you that probably 30% of the responses were pretty much like, I want a remote job.
Wow, really?
They were all working like, I want a remote job. Like, I'm not leaving my current job until I have a remote job. And I'm just like,
Wow.
I mean, everybody says that to me. So it's like I'm seeing both sides of it because I feel like some of my clients should give and be a little bit more flexible with being remote, but I understand why they're not. How do you manage staff that aren't there? There's a whole workforce that's missing out on the importance of being in work, like learning from other peers.
Right. Yeah, and the cultural aspect of it, that just evaporates when you don't have that piece of people coming together. I was just talking to my team. I did a board retreat for a really important group just 2 weekends ago. And one of the board members said, I want us to re-navigate towards in-person meetings because we are doing too many of our meetings remotely, and look at the energy that we've had in this room and look at how we've created new things by being together.
Yeah.
And the last 2 years where we've been meeting remotely off a Zoom call, we haven't done nearly this amount of work that we've done just in, a half a day. And
Sure.
I thought that was really telling. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, so.
Yeah, it is. You think about what's happening, right? Like it's so easy for me to take a meeting over Zoom, no commute time, no getting dressed, like all those things. You can be online and get so much more into your day, but you're taking away the human interaction, the stuff that happens before the meeting or after the meeting, the little telling the stories, the other board that I volunteer with or the other, nonprofit that I do work with. Like there's none of that banter going on. So it's like, you're just sort of brainstorming at that hour rather than what's the before and the after, and we're missing out so much.
Yeah, really interesting. Well, as always, Katie Warnick, it is amazing to get you with us. I really appreciate it. Katie Warnick, the founder and president of Staffing Boutique. You can learn more about Katie and her amazing team at staffingboutique.org. There's really a diverse group of people that work across this very specialized type of business. And you can read all their profiles of what they do and how they approach their work. It's absolutely fascinating, Katie, to have you on. I always feel like you're the oracle, giving us things that it would take us months to figure out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here in New York, things like filter across our country. And then, but we, on the nonprofit show, we get this information early. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Hey, I want to make sure that we express our gratitude to our amazing presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, of course, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. These are the folks that are with us day in and day out as we march through into our 6th year of broadcasting and more than 1,400 episodes. So, yeah. I know. When we started, Katie, I was a blonde and a lot younger. But no, it's really amazing. So I want to say thank you to everyone. And as we end each and every episode of the Nonprofit Show, we leave with this message: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone.